Welcome to the Agency Bud podcast. On the show, we talk to CEOs and founders, agency owners and business people about the challenges they've overcome and the steps they've taken to get to where they are. You can follow along at podcast.agencybud.com. On the show, we're going to be talking to somebody amazing. We're going to introduce that person in just a second. Don't forget to check out agencybud.com. Add in our software to your business and increase your recurring revenue with agencybud.com. Let's go and meet today's special guest. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us. Today on the show, we have a super special guest who focuses, of course, on return on marketing investment. In fact, the name of his company is ROMI Associates. And we are talking to none other than Craig Taylor, who's the managing director. Now, Craig has been the managing director of ROMI Associates, but before that was actually on the client side as the marketing director of the UK's largest technology company, where he was responsible for hitting revenue targets of £50 million. He's also been the interim CMO and consultants for numbers of mid-sized technology companies. And ROMI Associates focuses on the B2B technology sector only. And he's built an incredible agency focusing on that narrow niche. Craig's also managed to bring ROMI through as a HubSpot Gold partner, and of course is part of the Chartered Institute of Marketing. Craig, thanks for joining us on the show, man.
Nice to meet you. I think the only thing that's missing is I've never written a book, which I'm guessing probably quite a lot of your guests have. So
I tell you what, as soon as this podcast airs, you're going to get hammered with all of these people that will help you write their book. I'm absolutely sure of it, but it'll probably come at some point. Now, when we spoke before, one of the things that you mentioned was that you've grown ROMI Associates in a very specific vertical niche, which is the B2B technology space. Was there something behind that unique decision to only focus on a specific vertical?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a firm believer that you've got to have some level of specialisation or a niche focus. Yeah. So, and that's typically what we advise our clients. I think the main reason for that is just purely down to the fact that most of my experience has been in that space. So yeah, sure. I've always worked in the B2B technology market. So I think obviously having the experience of working for lots of different companies and knowing the sector so well, it just made sense to really focus down on that. And
yeah, nice.
It's a big sector as well, so there's plenty to go after, if you know what I mean.
I was about to say that it feels like of all of the sectors, and I know that there's plenty of them, it feels like the technology space and in the B2B world is such a growing, evolving space that you've got plenty of clients to start working, even from a startup that somebody's just getting started into that space, into the kind of Fortune 500, all into that space. You would have clients to choose from. How did you get started in marketing in general, Craig? Like, what was the draw for you?
It was pretty early on. I was probably one of those teenagers that had a bit of an idea of what I wanted to do. So marketing was probably something that I chose as a career from the age of about 16, 17. So that kind of was the direction of travel in terms of the education I took, the degree I took, etc. So I did a degree in marketing and business studies. And then I probably wasn't fortunate like some people are that they can go straight into a graduate scheme. So I found myself doing a few shitty jobs to begin with. And then I fortunately got a job as a marketeer working for one of the UK's first internet service providers. Okay. So that sort of gives you an indication of how old I am. So that was something like 20 years ago. And this was in news. People hadn't heard of the internet. So I'd tell my family that I work for an internet company and they're like, what's the internet? So it was quite an interesting environment. I remember sitting next to a guy who's probably a multimillionaire now because all he did all day was register domain names. So right. He's probably sitting on the beach in the Bahamas or something. But yeah, it was kind of, you'd be looking at emails, and we offered sort of email services, and it was quite, everyone was sort of crowded around a screen watching a picture of a cat download, and everyone was fascinated by it. So things have moved on significantly since then, thankfully. But it was a good starting point. Made a lot of good contacts. There was some quite senior people in that environment that sort of took me under their wing and coached me, and that really sort of set me up well for what came in the rest of my career.
So what do you think as that has evolved, the internet and digital marketing has changed what was, I guess, pre-2000, the term of marketing was all about billboards and magazine spreads. as you've developed into that internet space, have you felt a massive uptake from clients, or has there been the resistance along the way as well?
Yeah, it's been gradual. However, I think in the last 3 months, it's massively accelerated.
Of course.
And there's been a huge uptake in more digital, just because of the channels that are typically sort of more face-to-face or in person are now restricted or disappeared completely. But yeah, it's been a sort of gradual rise. I think there's been companies such as HubSpot that have, obviously we're a partner with, but they've had a huge impact, I think, through their inbound marketing initiatives and just whole methodology that's sort of really drove forward a lot of thinking in the space, and drove a lot of adoption. But I think it's still, if any CEO was to say to me, what's the most effective form of lead generation or marketing, or what's the most effective channel, I'd still say all of them. And it's always about a combination. It's always multi-channel, so it's offline, online, and you just got to get the right balance and get the integration working as best you can. But fundamentally, the key cornerstones of marketing that have always been still apply. You still got to have a good strategy, and still very much, for me, the biggest thing in marketing is about getting the message right and doing your research, doing your homework, and then digital, whether it's more face-to-face type activity, it still comes down to those cornerstones: having a good strategy, a good proposition, and knowing your market.
Saying it well. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
As you've moved forward, so working with your previous company where you were the marketing director there, and hitting such incredible revenue targets. I mentioned in the introduction there, a £50 million revenue target. That's a heck of a milestone to put in front of you. So you're running that division for that particular company. What caused you then to go out on your own? What was the spark behind that?
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, as the UK's largest tech company, the overall target as a business, as a global business, was about 50,000 employees at the time. And I wasn't the CMO. I was one of a few marketing directors in the organisation. But I mean, the revenues was in the billions. But I worked in various different roles in the organisation, both vertical and horizontal, as a marketing director. And then I got the opportunity to work in sales. So I did a 2.5 year stint in working as a sales director with a £50 million target and a team to manage. And I've never done any selling before. So I think, we hit the targets in a very difficult climate. But I wouldn't sort of say it was all down to me, far from it. I had a very good team, and I kind of tried to ensure they had everything they needed. And I think with most salespeople, the most important thing is making sure they get paid for their commission. I think that was one of the biggest things that I focused on ensuring happened. But I think, it's. I think any marketeer that may be watching or listening to this, I think I would strongly recommend, if you do want to really get on, try and do something other than marketing for a short period. Yeah. Whether it's a comment or whatever, and being in sales is there's nothing better, given that the two functions are so closely aligned. So,
definitely.
The exposure to sales and customers was invaluable, but also the pressure that is put on you in terms of meeting your targets is far surpasses anything that you'll ever get really working in marketing. So it can really help to toughen you up as well. Yeah, nice.
Craig, you mentioned that the two fields, sales and marketing, are so closely aligned. I've been running our business for 12 years and talked to lots of entrepreneurs and business owners. So often those two areas of skill are bundled together, and I find people say, that's our sales and marketing department. And I say, really? That's the sales and marketing department together? And I know how closely they need to work together. They literally don't have a job without each other. But do you face that as a battle with companies that you're working with? The salespeople are trying to do the marketing at the same time, or are you're trying to differentiate the two roles as you're coming in with Romy?
Yes and no. I think we're very fortunate. The clients that we've got, they're pretty sophisticated, and they get it. So we don't have to spend too much time trying to sort of extol the benefits of sales and marketing working together. So they kind of get that. I think the two roles overlap massively, but they're also quite distinct. So I think there's certain skills that marketeers have that salespeople don't have, and vice versa. So generally, salespeople aren't great producing content. They're not great with technology. Marketeers, on the other hand, they may not be as customer facing, may not be as good presenting. So there's various different skills that, but collectively they need to come together in one team. You see a lot of startups now, they don't differentiate between sales and marketing. They just call one growth team. Yeah. And I think that's the way you should look at it. You're all part of the same, business development function. You just perform different roles as part of the buyer's journey. And it's how you interact, how you support each other through that process. It's too simplified to say that marketing just does the top of the funnel stuff and generates the leads, and the sales team comes in and closes them. Because I think salespeople will develop their own leads if they're any good, and marketing can have an impact much further down the buying process at the sort of the bid stage as well. So
nice.
I think it's really just about having a team that has got the same sort of goals. They're heading in the right direction. They work closely together, and there's none of the usual, which you do find in a lot of organisations where sales team will be saying that marketing aren't generating enough leads or enough quality leads, and the marketing team will be saying we just don't follow them up effectively enough.
Constant. So it's a well scripted argument around
absolutely. Yeah, and then you still see that from time to time. But I think in the teams that work well together, there's less of that. It's very much about, because a lead is a lead, and it's how you work that lead. And sometimes things, there's no kind of linear path with the lead. It's a bit of a zig-zag journey, and people will delay decisions, come back, and so on. So it's how you kind of nurture those opportunities, and I think data can obviously play a big part in that as well.
Yeah, definitely. Interesting that you're finding that more and more startups are bringing that team element together moving forward. When you got started, mate, with going out on your own, how did you do that initial client acquisition specifically for you? Did you bring clients with you? Did you have an existing network that you tapped into? What was your kind of first play?
Well, to be brutally honest, the company I mentioned I worked for about 10 years, and then my old boss tempted me to go and work for her in another organisation, and it didn't really work out. So I was left with a decision where, and I was I've always wanted to do my own thing. My dad, when I was very young, always sort of rammed it home that I should, the best way to get on really is to try and set up your own business. So yep. I always kind of hankered after doing that. And so when it didn't work out at that organisation, I just felt that now may be the time. So and knowing other people that set their own businesses up, everyone always says that you need a runway. If you're going to move from being an employed person to set up your own business, you kind of just don't want to do it from a standing start.
Truth.
But, so I started doing interim work, which and I really enjoyed the freedom that came with that. So I started to build up a client base gradually through interim work.
Fantastic.
And then it sort of the number of contracts and opportunities started to really build, and then I felt that I had two choices. I either just carried on doing the interim work, and it can be feast or famine. So you can have a great project or a contract for sort of 12 months, and then that comes to an end, and then you've got to find your next one. So I kind of got tired of that. That was sort of, fortunately, I always kind of managed to go from one to the next, but you always felt that at some point you might have a bit of a lull. So I decided to go the other way and set more of an agency. So then started bringing people on board to work alongside me. So nice. That's kind of how it evolved. And that client base kind of was all through referrals, all through my network. And now I think we're at the point where we need to go beyond that and not just rely on that network and referrals. I think it's much more about doing the thing that most agencies really struggle with, which is promoting themselves and doing their own marketing.
Absolutely. On a lot of interviews, I've asked people, are you your own best client? And 90% of the people that we're talking to, almost shamefacedly say, no, they're too busy. They have, but it's also a good thing in the fact that they have so much work coming to them from word of mouth and referrals that, it's never been a need to turn that on. So as you're growing that early budding area of running your own agency, Craig, who was the first team members that you brought on, and how did you go about hiring the right people there?
Well, the first was probably an obvious one that many people do when you're moving from a sort of a single business owner to the next step, the first employee. And it was a virtual assistant who started sort of part time and then became full time, and and now is with us permanently. So it's that's how it started, and that sort of just released some of the, because everyone has to do administration and sort of some basic tasks, booking diary, booking calendar meetings and so on, booking meetings and so on. So that was why we initially brought Carrie in, and then she started to help with a lot of other things. She was fantastic in terms of her ability just to pick up more and more from me over a period of time. The next hire was then basically someone that would help with content. So obviously content is the fuel that drives a lot of marketing activity. So more and more with the clients I was working with on an interim basis, they were asking for other support in other areas. So do you know someone that can do this? Do you know someone that could do that? And I always had a very good network being client side of different agencies and freelancers that we work with. So that's kind of how the associate side of the business evolved.
Yeah.
But the next person to come on board was really my business partner, who I'd worked with another client who'd left, and we sort of stayed in touch. And then I managed to convince him to come and work alongside me, and that's when it started to really sort of become more of an agency.
Fantastic.
Then we built up the content side with more writers, and we just hired someone in the lockdown, which has been an interesting process because we haven't really met properly. We met before the pandemic, and we liked him so much that we hired him, and we've never really spent any time since he came on board, which has been strange, probably more so for him, because I think for us being a kind of, we've always tried to embrace the gig economy, we've always tried to embrace virtual working, so it hasn't been a massive adjustment for us to kind of adapt to the new environment. We kind of we run off Slack, we regularly doing Zoom calls like this. We've got a project management system that sort of binds everything and schedules our days. We work through a tool called Harvest, which is great to measure your productivity in your time. So we were kind of very much set up to work virtually and to work remotely anyway. So it hasn't been a massive adjustment. But I think, and this is what a lot of companies are facing now, is I think they've seen the benefits of actually working remotely has driven productivity in quite significantly in many respects, probably more so for companies that weren't doing it before. Yeah. So I think we've seen productivity increase by about 15% generally.
Wow.
But we were pretty productive before the lockdown. But I think there's a tension, coming back to the point of our recent hire, what you lose obviously is that social interaction and trying to build a culture. And I think companies are going to be sort of challenged with how they manage both. So there'll inevitably be a balance. But I know of companies that are closing down their sort of fancy offices in London or wherever, and they're moving to sort of these kind of WeWork type environments.
Yeah, getting together on a infrequent basis.
And those kind of environments are really kind of quite inspirational to work in, because they're very, very stylish. The way the decor's all put together, it's kind of very open plan. The ambience is kind of quite nice to work in, and we've worked in places like that. And I think ultimately there'll be more of these kind of hubs where people kind of drop in and drop out. And the company I worked for years ago, they did it probably 15 years ago, and they made the whole company work remote. Fantastic. And they had a really nice office in London that we would go to, and you had to book ahead to get in there, but it was a really nice environment to work.
And 10 years ago that was rare, but today it's the absolute norm.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think it will become the norm now, absolutely. But I think
you're right.
Yeah, the social interaction piece, certainly with Ben, who joined us recently, it's quite easy for us, if you're further ahead in your kind of your life journey, you've got, maybe a bigger house, you've got your own office at home. But when you're kind of younger, you might be working out your bedroom, and it's not quite the same experience working from home. So you've got to bear these factors in mind. So yeah, for sure. A lot of people, I think I saw a survey yesterday that a large proportion of the UK workforce are desperate to get back to the office when they've always probably hankered for actually working remotely.
Interesting.
Working from home. So yeah, I think every situation is different. You've got people that maybe got young children, they've got to do homeschooling. that can be difficult. So it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out over the next 6 to 12 months.
It's one of the most interesting times, definitely, that we've seen coming across. Craig, one of the things that I find absolutely fascinating, and it's right there in your name, and you referenced it just then, was Romy Associates. One of the things when we originally spoke is you said you've built your business based on the client needs rather than who you have in-house. Can you go into a little bit of depth with that for us?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously I've worked client side for longer than I've actually been running an agency, and I had no prior experience to how to run an agency before we did this. But having worked client side, I hired an awful lot of agencies in my time, and I kind of, there's certain things that you like and certain things that you don't like about how agencies operate. I was always impressed by the kind of the business leaders that would come in and do the pitch, and particularly if they had a marketing background as well. And certainly worked with a couple of agencies like that. But then actually, when you sign the contracts and you start the program, those people disappear, and you get a completely different set of people actually working on your account. And I just thought, that's not how I wanted to operate. That's not how I wanted to work. I also think, the biggest reason that you hire an agency is you want ideas from them. You maybe want a bit of additional capacity. But I think sometimes agencies can be quite arrogant that they know it better than the clients. And I don't think that's always the case. And I think there's a nervousness that you've always got to provide the ideas. But certainly, I mean, I was probably the biggest pain in the arse customer you could ever wish for for an agency. But I thought I considered myself pretty smart in terms of what we wanted to do. But quite often you found yourself having a running battle with the agency about, whether it was the right course of action and so on. So we were really big into content and thought leadership. But often we'd hire an agency and they would try and force us down the campaign route, which would be quite self-promoting. And we knew that it didn't work as effectively. So, but getting back to your point, I think the other thing with agencies is, particularly with the full service agencies, it can be quite, it's quite revealing when you start to work with them and you see the different skill sets, whether it's social media, whether it's creative, whether it's telemarketing, lead generation. They tend to be good at one or two things. They could be really strong on creating the branding side of it, but actually the lead generation is quite weak.
Yeah.
And obviously investing in that as a client, you want all of those functions to be on point as much as possible.
For sure.
And I think the challenge with that is marketing's become increasingly specialised. So, you even look at LinkedIn now to really get your head around that and to get the most out of it, you really need to know the platform inside and out. So I think what we were keen to do and have kind of continued this on is to have more of an on-demand virtual team that's got a range of different associates that are specialists in these different areas that can be called upon when needed. So it's not like, certain companies might not need an SEO specialist full time. Also, it's quite the kind of companies we work with typically are sort of mid-size, and it can be very expensive for you to bring in, senior marketing director, a marketing manager, events manager. You've got then all these different specialist areas. It can be hugely expensive as an overhead to bring that in. You probably don't need these people full time. Yeah. So what we do is we replicated what a good marketing function would look like, and that's why we're quite different to other agencies. So you effectively hiring a virtual marketing team, and then we come in, we devise a strategy based on what's right for the client. We don't have a whole bunch of overheads sitting behind us that we have to sell. So we don't have a team of SEO people. Because guess what? If I come into an organisation and I've got a load of SEO people that need to be utilised, I'm going to tell you your strategy is SEO, irrespective of if that's the right thing for you or not. Yeah. So we work with the client, we understand the business, we know the sector very well already, so that really helps. And then we formulate a strategy and a plan, and then from our wide network of associates, we will bring people in as and when they need them. Nice. And obviously the client might also have their own agencies in certain areas. They might already have an SEO team, and that's fine. We'll work alongside them. So we're quite flexible, and we'll kind of work around the existing environment, current situation. But yeah, I think the other thing with agencies as well, as a client, there's nothing worse than finding out where an agency hasn't been transparent. They've actually farmed out the work to someone else.
Mm-hmm. And you find out about it later.
You find out about it later, and then that they're just kind of they're trying to say it's their own capability and all the rest of it. Where it's quite clear that it's not. It's someone else that's doing that on their behalf. I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that, but I think you should be quite transparent about it with the client.
Yeah, definitely. I really found it fascinating that from an approach point of view, it's almost like you become the provider of the service, which is obviously the marketing, and then fulfillment. You've got your own team, but as you said, you're not carrying that weight of a team that you need to then on-sell those services. I found that a fascinating model, because I think that's a really good way to genuinely deliver the needs of the client, rather than to try and to sell the services that you have in the background. So yeah, that was fascinating for me. When you start working with a client and putting together that strategy, are you bringing in your associates in your mind? Are you saying, okay, well, I should get John on this one, I should farm this out to this particular person? Have you, and you talking about transparency then with the client, are you then orchestrating that with the client? Okay, I've got Fred who's going to be looking after this area for you because he's a specialist in ABC. Like, is that how that works with you?
Well, I think we've got sort of a methodology that we work with, which we kind of use the phrase internally, demand probability, which is trying to make sure that all of the aspects of strategy and tactics are kind of optimized, and the more that you do that, the better results that you'll get. So to give you an example, there's aspects of the approach that we'll take that will start with the strategy. And the strategy is very simple. It's firstly defining who your ideal customer is. Mm-hmm. And then the second part of that is defining the proposition that is going to best serve their needs. Mm-hmm. And then the third part of it is what are the best channels to actually connect the two. So what story are you going to tell to those buyers based on your proposition, and which channels are you going to send that story through? Mm. So we try and make sure that all of those aspects are done as best as they can. One of the key things that a lot of companies, we feel, kind of take or cut corners on it is around value proposition development, and it's one of the biggest challenges that many companies have. And it's not just about differentiating; it's about being distinctive as well. And there's a big debate around what's more important in sort of with a lot of CMOs on both of those sides. I think if you get both right, you're a distinctive brand and you differentiate, then you kind of you got the best of both worlds. Yeah. But I think what a lot of companies cut corners on. Actually really going out to the market and asking the market what their challenges really are, what their priorities are. So give an example, some time ago when I was working as an interim, I worked with a company that was, you've heard of Workday, the big HR and ERP software company. So they were a Workday consultancy, and they'd worked on their proposition as a board. They never sort of courted any external, contacts or potential buyers, just to understand what really mattered to them. So their proposition was all really about standardization, best practice processes, trying to reduce HR administration. So when I came in, the first question was, well, how did you go about creating the proposition? And they said, well, it's sort of an internal workshop. And I said, have you got any insights from the market that we can work with? Because I was there to effectively run the program, to take the whole thing to market. So I kind of insisted on speaking to just a handful of their contacts, clients, buyers. And when we went out and spoke to them, every single one that we spoke to had a completely different view of what was important. And that was, it was a shared view. So each of the 5 or 6 people we spoke to all had the same thing. Wow. So they were interested. They were buying Workday for its usability. And what was most important to them was, for years they've implemented software, HR software, that hasn't really got any adoption with the employees. But Workday was quite revolutionary. It's very usable. You can use it on your mobile phone, on your tablet. And what HR trying to do was obviously justify an investment in HR, and typically measured on adoption, and usability was the key to that. And it also drives more self-service, so more employees take up the software. Obviously, they're doing things themselves, and that has a really sort of positive impact on HR in terms of their workload. So they were pointing in this direction with their proposition, and actually the market was over here.
Wow.
So so it's quite significant. That's why I go back to, it's always about the message. So we actually, changed the structure of their methodology, changed the structure of the go-to-market, and it was a successful program because it was focused on the right things.
Nice. Give me a brag. What was the uptick?
Well, I don't think I was, because it was a short-term project, so I wasn't actually there when they started to close the actual deals, because there's like a 9 to 12 month sort of process. But we certainly generated a pipeline of sort of 4 times what their revenue target was in the space of probably about 6 months. So yeah, so I mean, it was from a standing start. And yeah, they I know that they're still very successful in what they do. So
very cool.
Yeah,
awesome. And again, I know now that they actually have that same message as their forefront position in the marketplace. So they've rested on it pretty well, and obviously the growth is clear to see. What's the what's been the client that has amazed you? As I'm looking at Romy Associates on the website and seeing your clients there and some of the past environments that you've won. What's the one that's come across your desk and you've gone, whoa, I can't believe that we're running this campaign for these guys?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to choose. All of our clients are kind of, as I say, that I think as any agency, you've kind of got to make sure that you're at the right level for you in terms of sophistication. So that there's companies, right, that are far too sophisticated for us to work with, and that's just the way it is. But there's other companies maybe that you'd have to do a lot of work just to educate them on how to do things that could be quite time consuming and maybe not a good fit as a result. But I think the clients we work with very closely, and they all kind of get it, and they get us, we get them. But I mean, there's maybe one that stands out that's probably a little bit different to everyone else we work with, which is a company called See It Now, which they produce video technology for automotive retailers. So these video walkarounds. So if you're going to sell a car, there'll be a salesperson in the dealership that will go around the car and talk to the car, show the car off in its best light, and it has a significant impact on revenue uptake, revenue sales for those dealerships, not just in terms of selling cars, but also in the sort of the after sales experience as well. So that's something that's a little bit different to what we normally do, because it's kind of sort of B2B stroke B2C in many respects. It's got such a close connection with consumers as well. So that's been a client we've been working with for about 6 to 9 months now. So but it's hard to pick a client. I'm sure the clients will think, why didn't you pick us?
Oh, true. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus there, but you really do
totally throw me under the bus there. But
no.
But yeah,
you really do have a great client list on the side, and I'm sure there's others there that you're working with and haven't put those through. But one of the things you mentioned there, and the whole theme of being specifically focused in the B2B technology space. You mentioned there's clients that are more sophisticated, can't work with them. Clients that aren't quite ready for that growth or that next level. Do you find yourself saying no to clients more often than yes? As in, are you filtering out the type of relationships specifically to the skill set with Romy?
I think I think where we are in our life cycle, we're starting to be a bit braver. I think when you start out, as most agency owners will tell you if they're watching, when you in the early days, you kind of take what comes your way, and that may not necessarily be the best thing. But you're always battling between long-termism and short-termism, in terms of, and that's a big thing for marketing as well. In terms of, we know it from a marketing perspective, it can take quite a long time to really get traction. But you've obviously got short-term demands as well in terms of generating leads and opportunities. But yeah, I mean, when we first started, we worked with small companies, really small companies, and I think sometimes that has its own challenges in terms of the realistic expectations they have for the budgets that they have, in terms of what can be achieved. So I think, we are a little bit more sort of discerning now in terms of who we work with, and there has to be a good fit. And we're very upfront about that from the get-go, really. So, we kind of set expectations in terms of how long things might take to get traction and the process we go through, and then sort of give an indication of a range of different budgets, really, and what could be achieved. So,
nice.
Yeah.
Very cool. It sounds like, putting the whole team and vision and strategy together with Romy has, just been a nonstop learning curve for you. Has there been anything on that side that surprised you? Have you had to upskill, hit the books, learn about anything in specifically as a business owner that you were surprised that came across your way?
I'm going to say it's a good question. You always say that when you're trying to buy yourself some time.
Give yourself a few minutes.
Yeah.
What's surprised? Let me ask it a different way, because that'll also buy you some time. What's been the thing as a business owner that has surprised you most about holding that position and being the MD of a company?
I think it's probably recently when we've kind of tried to recruit, and we're looking to do that again very, very soon. I think you sometimes we created a website, created a brand, and we focused on that a lot last year, and I think we were kind of nervous about unveiling that to the world a little bit, and no one really cares, to be honest. But when we went out to recruit, I think we were just kind of blown away by the response that we got.
Right.
And you kind of, so I think just in terms of the numbers of CVs and applicants that we had, and there was many good people that we interviewed during the process. So I think it's just it's quite humbling to see that, because you're a small business, you're trying to grow, and you're just a very small cog in a very big wheel. So to get such a response, people wanting, really keen to come and work with you, I think that was quite surprising and quite pleasing to obviously see.
Nice. And again, that's a great reflection on the brand that you've been able to build, and the message that Romy's putting out to the marketplace, to be able to have that as a guiding light, that really people are coming and being drawn to what you've created, which is fantastic. Craig, I'm so conscious of your time and so grateful for the opportunity to bounce back and forth. I want to ask you this as a bit of a challenge, if it's okay. One of the things that I ask the guests a lot, because our listeners are so varied in their experience. Everyone from, we can get started as a digital agent today. We can go and get a client and run their campaigns right now, if you've got the skill and the passion and the knowledge to do so, all the way through to people that have been running. Talking about one of our favorite people, she's running the marketing campaigns for the Hard Rock Marketing Group. So we've got people in lots of different spaces. So my challenge to you is this: if we took you out of Romy Associates right now, and we took you to a foreign city, and you had to grow again, get started from day one again, what would be the first 2 or 3 moves that you would make to get there as quickly as you possibly could?
Yeah, it's a challenging question. I think I've been fortunate that I've managed to sort of get to where we've got to, or we've got to where we've got to, without having to do too much cold calling and hustling. And a lot of it's been through referrals and through networking. Not saying that there's anything wrong with cold calling, and I think in that scenario, that's probably the thing you'd have to do. You'd have to get on the phone, you'd have to get out there, you have to hustle, go to networking events, and do all the typical things you expect just to start getting some traction.
Yeah.
I think it all comes down to relationships. And I think that's particularly important, not just from a prospecting or new business point of view, but also when you're working with clients.
Yeah, definitely.
That's the biggest single thing for us is relationships. There's a great book from, I think it was a guy called Michael, I can't remember his second name, it's a Polish name, I think, but he wrote a book called Clockwork, and he talks about the queen bee role, and how you've got, obviously, a queen bee is pivotal to the hive, and you've got to sort of figure out what in your organisation is the single most important thing that's going to make you successful. Mm-hmm. And for us, it's about building relationships. So everything's kind of pointing towards that. So it means that, in an environment like we're in now, where there's been 1 or 2 clients that have wanted to sort of slow things down a little bit, we've supported that and been flexible enough to go with it. Thankfully now they're kind of spending the money and they're seeing the opportunity where a lot of other people are cutting budgets to actually really go for it and try and create a brand, more brand awareness in this environment.
Yeah.
So I think going back to the point, you've got to hustle. You've got to,
be seen.
Identify who is your ideal customer is. You've got to find a list of companies that fit that criteria. You've got to think about your proposition, how you want to serve them, and you just got to get in front of them in whatever way you can. Some of those opportunities will be long-term relationships that you've got to keep nurturing. Others might have an immediate need, and you might have to, kiss a few frogs in the short term just to get some revenue. But you've got to balance the short term and long term. And I think generally what most people say is you should have a 55% focus on the long term and a 45% focus on the short term, if that helps.
Nice.
But and they also say if you're going to do business development, the biggest thing for a small agency is trying to manage the delivery of your client work with obviously trying to find new opportunities. And I think generally it's sort of a 4/5 ratio, where if you can find a day a week to do more business development, and in the early days that will kind of set you in a good in a good stead.
Absolutely. Again, thanks for the opportunity, mate. One of the things really right now in the world, we've talked a little bit about the impact that the pandemic's had, on relationship with your new hire. Hopefully you get to hang out with that person a little bit more moving forward. If you knew it was coming, if we were able to have this conversation in October last year, and we knew that come March, all of this was going to go down, what would you have done within the organization of Romy Associates to prepare and to really do as well as you can when it hit?
So with the benefit of hindsight, now that you know what has gone down, if you knew it was going to go down this way, how would you have prepared your business and your clients to be prepared for it? Well, I think we were probably fortunate in that the technology sector has been fairly buoyant through this period. So you just have to look at Zoom, for example, in terms of 43 billion, I think, in 3 months. So I think, all of our clients have been fairly well shielded from the pandemic from a business perspective, although there have obviously been concerns about the long term and about their own clients. But I think there's certain things that have happened in the last 3 months that if we'd been better prepared, maybe we could have acted on more quickly. I think the first thing that most people were concerned about from a sales and marketing perspective was, should we actually continue to do it when there's a lot of people suffering and needing a lot of help, and you sort of trying to manage the message where you're not looking in any way profiteering or opportunistic in this environment, where also just carrying on as normal and being tone deaf to what's going on. I think getting the right balance with the messaging has been probably the biggest thing that hit most people first, and now it's all about recovery and what do we do in the next 6 to 12 months. And there's obviously always an eye on budgets and getting the most out of the money that you do actually spend. But I think for most people that aren't directly impacted from a revenue perspective, and that they're still relatively healthy businesses, I think the smart ones are spending more on marketing because they see it as an opportunity where others are having to make cuts.
And as I said, making sure that the message is crafted to suit the times, obviously. And if they're doing that well, then we're hearing it across the board that there are obviously industries suffering. Like let's not paint that as the rosy picture. There's a lot of people out there that are doing it tough, and business owners that are closing their doors. But there's also a lot of upswing from people who are marketing savvy, that are able to share their message in new and different ways, that are seeing big upswings, which is, again, it's hard to balance the positive.
You've got to be sensitive to what's going on, and you've got to avoid the cliches. There's loads of cliches out there, and everyone keeps saying in these uncertain times, or we're here to help, and all that bullshit. And I think you've got to avoid that sort of stuff. And if you haven't really got a proposition that helps people in this current time, then you have to be careful about how you try and leverage in any way what's going on, and try and avoid that if it's all possible. But I think it's sensitivity and empathy is really, really key at the moment. But ultimately businesses still need to continue, and they need to drive revenue, they need to sell. So again, it's a balancing act that you've got to be very careful with. So I think you need people that, whether it's inside your organisation or whether it's an agency, that is kind of very on the money in terms of how all that's kind of shaking out. So I think, going back to October, if we'd have been as prepared as we can around all those sorts of things, I think that's what we would have chosen to do with the benefit of hindsight.
Yeah.
And I think we have reacted pretty quickly and adjusted pretty quickly to what's happened, to be fair.
Yeah, cool. Well, I think the reason I asked that is purely this. I think we've got more of it to come. So that foresight, hindsight, it's almost like we're not through it, and obviously there's more changes and more flexibility that's needed. So let's see if we can get that growth for the next 6 to 12 months, taking into account what we think is going to be a changing world and, the way the market swings. So let's hope everybody's able to look a little bit forward and think, how can we use what we know now to already prepare for that next 6 to 12 months and see where we go from there.
Yeah, I think there's inevitably a focus or a sort of a lean towards short-termism just to get through.
Of course.
But I think, marketing and developing brands and growing businesses is much more of a long-term game. So you've got to try somehow to keep an eye on both.
Definitely. But
you've still got to get through the next 6 to 12 months, and no one really knows what's going to happen. But I think for me, what I hate to see is negativity. I think you want, it's about confidence. Everything, markets run on confidence, and I think the more bullish and upbeat and confident we can be, that's just going to have a better impact on all of us generally.
Yeah, I think so too.
Try and avoid negativity at all costs. But I mean, the press is full, the media is full of negativity, and I think that's a shame. I think
if you listen to it, you just want to close the door and pull the covers up, and and as you said, if we can be positive in that market space and keep things moving forward, then everybody wins. And try and push that positive message forward in terms of we are keeping trading, we're keeping moving, keeping the world going. Like, let's not ignore it, but stay positive at the same time. I think, you're right. It benefits everybody along that way. Absolutely. Guys, this is Craig Taylor. He's the MD of Romy Associates, an incredible agency out of the UK that have built specifically in the B2B technology sector. How can people keep in touch with you, Craig? How can they see what you're doing and the exciting stuff that's coming along the way with Romy? What's the best way for people to see that? Yeah,
the obvious way is just come to our website, which is romy-associates.com.
We'll make sure we've got the links on the show notes there for everyone as well.
That'd be great. Yeah, we're pretty active on LinkedIn, and you can find us there as well. So, first port of call, definitely come to our website, and you can learn a lot more about us there.
Fantastic. There's some really great blog articles on your site. So again, it's romy-associates.com/blog. There's some great articles there that revolve around marketings and the ideas that Craig and the team have brought out into the market. Craig, again, thank you so much for the opportunity to bounce back and forth, man. I've really enjoyed it. I look forward to hearing how we're going over these next 6 to 12 months, and hopefully we can keep in touch.
Absolutely. It's been a real pleasure. Yeah.
Cheers, man. Thanks again.
Cheers.